Welcome back to the Broady Windsor Group Podcast, where we go beyond the transaction to talk about the issues that shape our communities. Today, we're sitting down with longtime Beaconsfield resident Greg Orleski, who's running for mayor of Beaconsfield in the upcoming municipal election on Sunday, November 2nd. In this conversation, we'll explore Greg's vision for Beaconsfield's future, how he sees development, transparency, and fiscal responsibility evolving in our city, and what kind of leadership he believes Beaconsfield needs next. Whether you're a lifelong resident or a new homeowner, we hope this episode helps you make a more informed decision when you head to the polls. Thanks for pressing play. You're listening to the Broady Windsor Group on Real Estate, the podcast for homeowners seeking guidance and support on everything related to owning a home. This includes much more than just buying or selling. We've got you covered for everything from mortgages and financing to home maintenance tips, renovation and design advice, and of course, the latest insights and analysis on what's happening in our local communities. Hey, Greg, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I'd like to kick this off just by asking a very simple question. I know you're a longtime resident of Beaconsfield, as am I, and I wanted to get your take on what do you love most about Beaconsfield and why did you choose Beaconsfield to raise your family?
Good question. So, easy one for me. So I'm born and raised in Alberta. Lots of space, mountains, fresh air. And at the time, a smaller community. So everyone knew everyone. It was a quality of life that impeccable. I come to Montreal because I wanted to study at McGill. I wanted the big city. I wanted French. I discovered very quickly, well, guess what? There's this community on the island. And I was actually a realtor, probably you would know her, that pushed me hard. Beaconsfield with your two young children, Greg, at the time, 1 and 3 years old, that's where you have to be. I came here, I sat for 50 minutes in the road just watching, and I bought the house. We have the green, we have the nature, we have the fresh air, we have that small town buzz where everyone knows everyone, is friendly, we help each other, and we have good quality of life. And I've been here 25 years, married, 3 children, 2 grandsons, 18 months and 3 years old.
Fantastic. Now, we all know that a lot has changed in the last 25 years.
Yes.
Beaconsfield obviously needs to evolve. And so I'd like to get into that with you right now in terms of what, if you were to become mayor, what would you want to preserve and keep? And what do you think needs to evolve and change?
So those 3 elements that brought me to Beaconsfield, that have kept me here for 25 years. So the nature, the green, the water, for me, that's non-negotiable. To that spirit of feeling belonging, that community spirit, also for me, non-negotiable. It has to be protected, and the quality of life. So those 3 elements have to remain here, in my view. And when I'm talking to residents, going door to door, it's common. The green, fresh air, that community spirit, and quality of life. That said, I think we can still grow. And the previous mayor and the council have already started that. We have an incredibly impressive, one day to be iconic arts and cultural center that's coming that will change Beaconsfield, but will not change the spirit. So I think there's a way to maintain those key elements, maintain our spirit, but build.
And that project you were referring to is the one down by Centennial Hall and the Marina, this Reimagine project, right?
Correct. Lord Reading, the property right beside the Centennial Park, and which I will give also kudos, as I understand, to the previous administration. We will not be destroying that park. As I understand, that park with the trees and the beach remains, which is why we're going into the Lord Reading property. So that has to, so we can modernize, we can build, we can attract businesses, and we'll get into other topics. I'm sure you'll ask me, well, how does that work if you still want to maintain those elements? Great, but it's possible.
That's it. So a few key hot topics that I'm hearing time and time again. I want to get your take and views on it. One would be fiscal responsibility and management, and how do we manage this tax base of Beaconsfield being primarily residential? We don't, unfortunately, have the luxury of having industrial and commercial tax bases that other municipalities have. So how do we manage that in terms of being able to invest and grow in our city without putting the burden primarily on residential taxpayers?
It's a good question. I'm going to break those into 2. So one is the financial management. So I've had the opportunity, even before I announced my candidacy for mayor, to speak to the council, the council people, men and women. And as I look at our financials, I look at the revenue debt ratio, we're managing our finances well. There's always room for improvement in everything. So I want to be very clear today that if I'm making suggestions, it's not a criticism, it's improvement.
Yeah.
If I was elected in 4 years, I leave, somebody else will come in and improve even further upon what I've done. So I think we're doing well. If we have big aspirations, we're going to have to continue that financial management. You're right. The important question is the tax base. So the reason that we are green and it's natural, we have that community spirit and we have quality of life is because we don't have the industry and commerce that Point Claire has, that Kirkland has, that Dorval has, etc. And that's not a bad thing. This is why we have the city that we have. So I think there are, to create revenue, we are limited, and I think we have to be realistic. Whatever revenue you create is not going to move the needle so that all of a sudden our taxes drop. However, I think there are ways, and I see 3 ways of doing that. One is optimizing, and I'll explain that in a few minutes, optimizing the property and the buildings that we already own. And a very clear example, what we're doing already. So Centennial Hall in Centennial Park, we rent that building. Like there's people that can rent it for functions, $500, $300, and it generates revenue. Again, it's not dropping our taxes, but it's helping maybe to maintain and pay for that building. With the Arts and Cultural Center that's coming up just adjacent to Centennial Park, I think we have opportunities there, the rec center, to be sure that those facilities, Beacon Hill, for instance, are being used to the max. Not taking away from the residents' use and enjoyment, but generating revenue. I think there's also, and even the park, frankly, is an opportunity to, beautiful park by the water, is to also find ways to generate revenue from events without disturbing the neighbors and the quality of our life here. I think secondly, there are programs out there that are from the city of Montreal, they're from the provincial government, the federal government, and different agencies, whether it be climate, infrastructure, repairs, that are available. And I know the city is taking advantage of that. And even donors, private citizens that are willing to give what they can and what they want to help the city. They're there. We are using them. I'm living an experience right now that I'm managing where we also know this takes time and effort to get those funds. So I'm not familiar with the structure, but we have to be razor sharp, that we have people doing nothing else but looking at those funds and being ready that we have a plan, because you don't get them for free. You have to have use for them.
I know that from experiences. Applying for grants is a very time-consuming, and like you said, you need to have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted. And I was reading about, sort of the cost estimates for the new rec center, which is definitely due for renovation, right? And I was seeing, $29 million that would need to be phased over a 5-year period. And then there was applying for grants, and there was probably, I was reading maximum potential grants of up to $20 million. So then it comes down to, how do you make sure that you maximize those grant applications and then try and find other sources to make up the difference?
And I would tell you, so you're exactly right. And I would tell you, to be successful, you have to have a plan. The question will always be, yes, we have the 20 million. What are you going to do with it? And if you don't have a plan, it delays, it takes time. Then all of a sudden that program disappears, it changes. So you have to be ready with a plan, and you have to know where you're going, and those things have to happen together. And then thirdly, to your question, it's like partnerships. And when I look at partnerships, it's doing things together. So it could be revenue generating. It could be something that's happening in the park. I'm just throwing crazy ideas out there, that you're doing an event and you're partnering with people to sponsor, helping the city, helping them. It could be, banding with other people and I know we've done this a little bit already at Beaconsfield, where we're talking to our neighboring cities from the demerged sector, and we're working together to bid to get services. So although one might say, well, that's not really revenue generating, I would suggest it is, in that it brings your costs down and frees up your revenue to do other things back in the city. So those 3 things together, I think, have to be focused on. Again, being very clear, I'm not suggesting that if elected mayor that our taxes will drop, but they may not go up as much as we would expect them to go up because we don't have other revenue.
Or to your point, they may be used more efficiently.
Correct.
In order to take the same amount of dollars and put it to use in a more efficient and productive way.
Correct.
And I'd also like to touch on your experience with nonprofits and philanthropic organizations, touch on that because these skill sets came in very handy of what you were just describing as creating partnerships and bringing organizations together to basically share from economies of scale rather than trying to do it all on their own.
Right.
Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this is going to sound perhaps like a lawyer's answer. I can't disclose 100%, but what I can tell you. So I've been working for the last 6 months, a little under 6 months, with a large organization in West Island that are focused on helping people that are in need, that need help, in particular with food insecurity. Big dreams. When I came on board, I'll speak. When I came on board with the West Island Assistance Fund as chairman of the board, big dreams, big hearts. These people know that there's a problem in West Island. 1 out of 4, it's reported, people face food insecurity, including in Beaconsfield, but principally in the Roxborough area. Big dreams. How do we serve the community better? No secret, they had made an offer on a huge building to almost quadruple their footprint and be able to expand businesses. And then things kind of stagnated. The dream was still there. And all of them, they just needed, how do we pull this together? How do we get municipal support, provincial, et cetera? How do we get people that are not government to come in to support this project? My skill set, so networking, building coalitions. We will be shortly announcing that project and even a further surprise, which will be, I think, welcoming for everybody, that will show that in the last 6 months, we have gelled that as a team. I will not take 100% credit because the dream was there and the enthusiasm. And it's the same skill set, understanding, looking at the needs, understanding how do we better serve the community with even less money than Beaconsfield to get more bang for our impact. And this will happen. I'm 100% convinced it will happen. And it'll happen, and we will be opening, I'm hoping, next September.
This is great. And this is what you're talking about, is having a shared vision for the community and engaging residents in really understanding what do they want Beaconsfield to look like moving forward.
Correct.
And there's a big challenge there because you obviously have competing views, competing interests. What would your plan be to help bring people together towards a common vision for the city?
So for me, the key to that, the simple answer, not perhaps an execution. It takes a lot of effort. It's communication. Again, I keep coming back to communication. You have to speak openly in a safe environment. And when I say safe, not physically safe, like intellectually, emotionally, where people feel that they can say whatever they, with respect, they can express themselves, they'll be listened to, and there's a good, healthy dialogue. It starts with communication and then continued communication. It starts by understanding, again, the needs, and understanding also and helping people to understand common vision, understand that we won't get it 100% everybody, but we'll get close. And once you start that momentum, the rest is easy to sort of expand. It becomes contagious. You get to talk to government, stakeholders, other people, and I'm sure what Mayor Broady and his council people did for the Arts and Cultural Center. I'm sure that was no easy. We flipped the button, we got it. Let's move forward.
Well, that was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. Mm-hmm.
And I think, moving forward, this is a point that you're raising in your platform, which is more transparency in City Hall.
Yes.
And giving the residents more access to information so they actually understand the context of decisions and how they're being made. Maybe expand a little bit on that and what your views are around that.
So transparency for me, again, I'm a communicator. I've learned a long time in my career. I remember when I started at Merck Frost, my boss at the time, who was head of legal, had said to me, communicate. You can never communicate too much.
Yep.
Better to over communicate, have someone tell you it's too much than to not have a surprise and people are not happy. So transparency, communication, critical. And then in that communication, to be successful, you have to understand, what is it that the people listening want to hear? What's interesting to them? Because if you're talking about what's interesting for you, and I'm sure you know that in real estate, but it's not what they want to hear, they don't care, it's not a good communication. So transparency, how do you communicate? So what I would be doing, and I thought about this already before even us speaking, how do we get that quickly? Because I think it's important. We have a lot of things that are happening in the world. So what I would do is I would want to launch very quickly, if I was to be elected and take office, would be to launch a multi-platform, transparent, effective communication strategy. I would be looking already, because I know we have a lot of tools that we communicate. We have paper contact, you can contact your council person. I'd want to look at that to see where are we, how do we build that even more effectively, and start that immediately. And it could be communication, it could be Zoom meetings, it could be regular town halls. Again, not part of legal process consultation. Just come out and meet your mayor and your council people and let's talk.
Yeah, I know Dominic Godin, for example, regularly holds, little come and meet your counselor coffee sessions, and inviting people to come out and talk about things that are
Correct.
of importance or of interest to them.
I'm aware of that, and I applaud that. I'd like to see that at the city hall level for the mayor and all council people. And then after that, it's not just good to set it up and you sit back. You're always going to miss something. You're going to have to correct a little bit. You have to keep following up and checking in. Is it effective? Are we getting to you? Are you getting that information in correct? But that would be a huge focus during the 4 years if I am elected as mayor.
Because one thing I've heard is complaints from regular citizens or residents is, yeah, I'll go and attend a city council meeting, but most of it is just, voting on something that's already been decided, and I don't really get any context or explanation as to what's happening. So it's kind of a boring process where I'm not really getting much information. So why bother? It's kind of way. So talk to me about what you're proposing in terms of transparency around city council caucus meetings where things are actually debated and discussed, rather than just giving a minutes of a public city council meeting.
So, and I'm going to give you an example where I'm actually doing that, and I've changed a little bit the culture. So again, in my view, and there are things that have to be done at a city council meeting. Approving regulations, that's just form. If you don't, nothing gets done in the city. Hearing from citizens, coming and having an opportunity to speak directly during that meeting, I think is also important. However, the caucus, I'm not aware. I don't understand why those aren't being made public, except for being a lawyer. I know that personal information, so if I have information about your marital status, your social insurance, your credit cards, et cetera, your health, there are laws that say I cannot make that public without your consent. There are also courts sometimes will order that no one is allowed to talk about this. You have to respect. There are also sometimes with federal, provincial government, if you're entering into certain types of agreements, they'll say, well, you can't disclose this. Again, usually the terms are pretty much transparent, but there's those exceptions. So barring those exceptions where you cannot legally, I see no reason why you cannot share what goes on in caucus, and you should. That's where you're discussing. And I would say that if you're, again, as what I want is even before you get there, if you have that transparent communication channels, like there should be no surprises. I mean, there should be no concern. Why would you not share? Because you should be talking about what you're already saying in those public town hall meetings. So that for me is like a given. It has to happen. Keeping in mind, and the last thing I would say is when you cannot speak, it's just not a confidential, we're not talking about it. You have to explain to people, I'm sorry, Scott, I can't talk about that because there's a law that tells me, there's a court decision that I can't. And sometimes you can still find ways of generalities, which doesn't violate those laws. But you have to explain to people, otherwise they don't understand and they think that you're just hiding things.
Gotcha. That's a great point. And then sort of one topic that's been at the top of this current administration's agenda for a long time, and Mayor Burrell has been the spearheaded leader behind this, is this lawsuit against the agglomeration of Montreal. And maybe give us a sense for what's your take and viewpoint on that situation, and what you would do as mayor to maybe change things.
So I've, as I mentioned, I think earlier I've had, or I may have mentioned in some of my campaign material, I've had 25 years plus of managing very complicated litigation, not only in Canada, but in abroad, with government agencies, with individuals, with companies. And the one thing I learned very early in my career is you're better to take the $100 today. And I'm not saying settle. I'm not saying give up. I'm not saying just grab whatever and thank you very much and you run. I'm a fighter. I will go the full 9 yards and go to court and wait if I have to. However, if there's an opportunity to get the $100 a day, reinvest it, and I'm just throwing broad numbers, 7% versus you wait until decision, the first decision, which we will one day have if we do go to court, and then the appeal, which is another couple of years afterwards, you will not, unless you're very lucky, get 100%. So you won't get the 100, and there's, that the value, there's inflation. You've lost money. So what I'm suggesting is, and I'm not being critical, I think, and I applaud Mayor Burrell and the council for having the courage
To fight.
to sue, because that, I'm sure, was not an easy discussion. And I have heard in going meeting people outside of Beaconsfield, there are people that didn't agree with that decision outside of Beaconsfield. So I applaud that, but I think there's an opportunity, and I've had a lot of experience where I have settled significant lawsuits with larger sums than the 20 million plus that we're trying to get before we've gotten to court and had that money reinvested for my clients. So I think that's something that I would like focus on, because if we can get that money earlier, or even if we go to court, maximize.
Because I've heard a lot of people say, well, there's nothing really we can do right now. We're waiting for it to go through the courts until it gets to trial. And I think what you're saying is, no, there are definitely things that we can do. There are backdoor channels. There's negotiation tactics, strategies that could be put in place here.
And again, I'm going to come back to, it's about asking questions. It's about listening. It's about understanding. And once you do all that, then you can figure out pathways to get what's best for your client.
That's the same in our industry as well, right? It's the best negotiation is where you are finding a common ground.
Correct.
And you're actually collaborating with the other side to find something that is amenable and positive for both sides.
Yeah. And I would go through, you may smile at, even in very strongly fought litigation, there is still that attitude, common ground. You'd be surprised, even though you're at war, there's still that common ground that will, with the right people at the table, find ways to resolve. So one of my focuses, because with everything that I think we'd like to do here to maintain those three very important characters of Beaconsfield, densification, improving our infrastructure, helping build businesses, looking at our seniors and our younger people. What do they do when they want to leave the home, but they want to stay in Beaconsfield? We don't have options here. They have to leave not only Beaconsfield, sometimes West Island. So all of that requires funding. And we have no big businesses. We have no industry to support that. So we have to be smart. And this money coming from that lawsuit would help us. So again, thank you, Mayor Burrell. I appreciate the gift.
So now you've done a great segue into our next hot button topic, which is in the city of Beaconsfield, densification, how that would occur, where would it occur? Share with us your ideas for how that would happen.
So I'm going to sound like a broken record, Scott, and I'm sorry. What's important to me, and I would have a really hard time even compromising on that, is what Beaconsfield is. The fresh air. So I keep saying that's important, and that drives everything, including densification. So there is a huge initiative that is happening where we'll have to consider, we're not being forced, but we're going to have to consider densification. So I think the first thing I want to say is, I'm not looking at high rises. So I would never, ever support high rises in Beaconsfield. It's not who we are. I'm talking low rises, and we have an example at the old tennis court. I think
Part of the Adamus
4 or 5 buildings, for me, probably the max, but low rises. I think we have to be smart. So I'm a firm believer. We know what's happening. There's incentives and political pressure from the province and power that we densify, not just Beaconsfield, but every municipality. I'm a firm believer. Take the bull by the horns. Be proactive. And think about densification that's going to serve our population. I mentioned earlier during our chat that seniors that have not seniors, adults, because they're not all seniors, I'll be careful.
Empty nesters and downsizers.
Right, I'm sorry, you're right. Empty nesters.
Or right-sizers.
Right-sizers, and also young people that are ready to leave mom and dad's home, but they want to stay with their friends. So I'm thinking there's an opportunity here to say, okay, densification. And when I say densification, by transportation hubs or networks. So that's what I'm thinking of, places like that are close to, St. Charles, this area here, which we've already started, even possibly on L, but different locations. You could be thinking of densification, modest housing for those youth that aren't quite ready to leave or don't want to leave West Island, their community, right sizing that they have a place to go. it's a win-win. And then they're close to transportation because a lot of them either can't drive or they don't want to drive, but they need to get around. So I think there's a win-win there, but it has to be smart. And again, it has to be done in consultation so that residents understand what does this mean and how is it going to change, and they're reassured that it will not change the makeup of Beaconsfield.
Right. So this is a key point where how would you learn from past mistakes? For example, the Adamus project where the developer runs out of money and leaves a complete eyesore there for God knows how many years. And I've heard sort of rumblings that, we need to do a better job of ensuring that whoever is developing these projects has the money, is able to complete the project, and are they doing it in consultation with local residents?
Yeah.
Right? You've got the Elm project is another one where that, it had public consultation, and a lot of the residents around there were like, not in my backyard because this is going to cause a traffic nightmare right around my neighborhood. So again, it's about how do we get the citizens involved earlier on in the consultation process before the developer comes with a plan for what they're planning to do for that space.
It's a very good question. A very good question. I am familiar. I've heard, I don't have the inner workings because I'm not on council or in administration at the city, but I have heard Elm. I've drove past the old tennis club, like you said, a bit of an eyesore. So I think first and foremost, again, it's, and I'm not going to say consultation because not the regulated consultation that you have to follow to get certain things passed at council, but that discussion upfront. So what I would do if we were looking at those two areas, the first thing is, do you own the land or you don't? And we don't own those two pieces of property. They're owned by other people. So you look at that and you say to the residents, and you have to start to socialize. What is it you're thinking before you get and start putting plans in consultation and people are already in fighting mode?
Yeah.
And I believe, and I've heard from around the Elm area, I've heard from some people, well, no, because I'll have no sun. Like I'll be in the dark, and I love my house and I moved here because of that. And I've heard other people say, well, but for me, I can't stay here. And that place is like an empty lot. It could have a few businesses. I wouldn't have to drive to Kirkland. I wouldn't have to drive to St. Charles. I wouldn't have to drive to Fairview. I could do everything here, handy, my family. So a bit of opposing views. But consultation, you have to understand, and I've learned in my career, and this is one of my strengths, there's always solutions. Always solutions, but it takes discussion. So you have your discussion, and I think so to be sure that what you're doing is in line with what the residents of Beaconsfield want and they're comfortable with. Then to your second point, so we don't own the land. We have to work with people. Obviously, they're going to develop. They're going to build. So I look at what it's for me.
And what are the incentives?
Correct.
Right.
So it's negotiation. It's still negotiation. Now we have certain tools. I think are almost like wonderful, more than if you're in private, if you're just in the private, corporate world. We have regulations. So we kind of control to some degree what can and cannot be done with that property. And it's not just about zoning. There are other things that you can impose, whatever that may be, deposits, which I think we already have on certain properties where people have to put so much of a deposit. But you have to be reasonable. You can't ask a developer for a project that might cost 20 or 30 to put $10 million in a fund and attract someone. There's no one there will put $10 million in a fund that's unusable to get 3 or 4% interest when they can be putting that money to use. So you have to be reasonable with that person, but you have to negotiate. And it's not just negotiate. This is your zoning for me. And again, I'm not being critical. It's my skill set. You have to be thinking, well, what are the risks? Bankruptcy. The person delays. They change their mind. They do suboptimal work and you've got problems afterwards. They don't do exactly what they promised to do. So all of those things have to be negotiated, agreed to, and then monitored to be sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do with that property.
So another example would be some of the townhouses on Elm that was only discovered with the floods last August, that the infrastructure was not done properly at all. And these residents are getting their garages completely flooded every time there's a major storm. And now it's going back to, well, whose responsibility is that? Was there enough checks done by the city to make sure that the developers were, doing the proper due diligence on the infrastructure?
You know what I would say? What I would say on that, in all due respect, there was a time, like standards have changed, weather has changed. So the infrastructure that was put in place 10, 15, 20 years ago, perhaps, I'm not saying that's the case with this land, doesn't work today. With climate change, it doesn't work. So it could be negligent. I mean, who knows? It was 30 years ago. We have a different type of environment. And we know that there's flooding even with newer pipes and drainages throughout the city of Montreal. Even the newer developments can't handle sometimes the water when we have these downpours. So I guess to come back to your question, transparency, you have to ask citizens, you have to reassure them, like, what does this mean? And then you have to be, when you move forward with the project, you have to be looking at that person that you're going, it's a partner developer that is doing what they're doing in the best interest of the city. And that can be done through regulations, that can be done through contract negotiations, and not just clauses. You have to think, are they practical? Are they enforceable? Because, the best drafted legal clauses sometimes mean nothing, as I'm sure you know in real estate. So long answer to your question.
No, it's a good answer. And the other flip side of that coin is then, from the projects that we're putting forward and approving, we're hearing a lot about mixed use, right? Because that's going to give us, like you said, the example in the Elm Plaza, where you've got commercial on the main, first floor, which is giving people access to shops where they don't have to go and drive up to Kirkland or Point Claire, and then having 2 or 3 stories of condos and maybe some townhomes around there, so you're not building skyscrapers,
Correct.
and doing that in a sustainable way close to traffic arteries, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Public transportation.
Correct.
Okay. How many opportunities do you see in Beaconsfield for these types of projects to occur?
So I see, I'm going to talk about Beau Repair Village for a few moments. I think Elm is another area. And depending how big you want to dream, there's other areas, but let's just, for now, so I don't alarm people. Beau Repair Village, when I say Beau Repair Village, it's more than just those, couple roads. It could extend for quite either east or west. And then there's Elm. So I think there's, and I tell you where I get inspired. And I look at even St. Anne's, to some degree, it started slowly in their sector. It's not like Point Claire, but similar. And this is almost like the mud. Everybody, even when you see on the sources, you see Saint Jean Boulevard, you see Brunswick, huge. I'm not suggesting that, I would never, but the concept is the same. So I think there's an opportunity to help a lot of different people and further the infrastructure and the of Beaconsfield. So I think there's an example where you could have businesses on one floor, which to some degree, it's already there in the village.
Yeah.
We have businesses, then we have the second floor, but they're not residential. They're kind of commercial, which is okay also. But there's an opportunity there. And I hesitated where I would give this example, but I guess I will. So one thing that when I was in US, in the Chicago area and even the Northeast, you would see how clever these rustic, quaint little villages, well, towns like Beaconsfield, bigger buildings, of course, it's always a little bit larger in US, but you'd see these quaint buildings, and they would build a small area like this where they'd have the main floor, and they blended it. Same architecture, same look, that you would swear it was built in the same era. So it wasn't offensive. It blended in. So I think that's what I'm looking at. I think there's an opportunity there. And what does that do? That gives us opportunities to offer residents that are right-sizing, young people that want to stay. It gives us an opportunity to help the businesses that are here doing well, attract more businesses and keep them here. I've seen during 25 years, I can't even list how many businesses have come, and I've got excited, and a year later it's something different because not that they're not good businesses, they may not have been the right businesses. So all of that's right. I think we should start to look at that because that also feeds a little bit into revenue. It's not going to decrease our taxes, but it makes for a more vibrant, economically strong city.
A great point. It ties into what our friend Brian Miller and Dominic have been doing with Les Amis de Beau Repair here in the villages, creating that community and inviting people to come out and share their ideas for what would make the village a destination and make it somewhere where you'd want to come with your family. And then how do we do that in such a way that we can also incorporate some densification to create more housing for seniors who would like to stay in the neighborhood,
Correct.
but necessarily don't want to go into a 1-bedroom tiny apartment.
Correct.
And also for young people who may want to be able to share a property to have it more affordable. Maybe
Right.
there's some duplex potential and opportunities. So there's like you said, being creative, I think is a key to
For sure.
coming up with some solutions. Okay. Now, when it comes to private residents want to improve their property,
Yeah.
we see there's another hot button issue here is construction.
Yes.
And what do you see as the current problems or challenges that Beaconsfield is facing? We hear it a lot in terms of from residents who are applying for permits and the new construction policies that seem to be a little bit hard to follow sometimes. What's your view and comment on that process and maybe some ideas to improve it?
So I think it's a really good question. As I'm going, door to door, talking with residents, I'm hearing a few things. I'm hearing that people are happy with this process. I'm hearing also that this is taking a little bit too much time. I'm hearing we're not sure how it works, clear. So I'm hearing that, but happy, improvements are needed, etc. So I guess I would start out by saying again, because I'm going to come back to those three key elements at Beaconsfield. It's necessary we have that, because without that, we will change. Beaconsfield will not remain the same in terms of that, quality of life. So it's necessary to have those checks and balances. What I would tell you is how you get through that. And I'm going to give you an example. So from my years in pharma, there was a time when I started in pharma, and not too long ago, where you would discover a medication that had a lot of clinical data. You would give it to the authorities. It could have been Canada, it could have been US, it could have been Europe, anywhere in the world. And you just hoped that they would get to it and they would approve what people needed the medication. Speed forward, the same complaint. We don't understand. We've checked all the boxes, but you keep coming back, asking us for this, changing this, and back and forth and back and forth. In the meantime, people need the medication. And you never knew when it was going to end. What's happened now is, even in that industry, highly regulated for our safety, there are timelines now. The governments will commit that we will, if you do this and you give us this, we start the review, and within 12 months or 15 months, we will have a decision, either a bad one or a good one, but and there's more of a dialogue to help people move through that slightly ambiguous strategy. So I think the same applies here. I see it as analogous, that you could come up with, even though it's hard, just like medication, what is it you want? You're trying to describe a picture and explain to somebody that's what we want. But you could do visual renderings. Here's examples that the residents were happy with. Here's how they blended in. So people see something visual. So you could prepare sort of a kit to say, this is our guidelines written. Here's some visual, and architects will get this. And then I think commit to timelines, like reasonable timelines. You're not going to get that permit within 30 days. It's going to take time. You're going to have, but you could say to somebody, if you do this and you give us this, just like in the pharma industry, and you have some pictures, we will commit within a certain period of time, you will have an answer from us. Yeah, I think that's a small step. And then you revisit. How is it working? Always with keeping in mind, and I'm sorry to be like this over and over, those three qualities of Beaconsfield, being sure that they are protected.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest complaint from residents is, tell me what I need to adhere to and I'll do it. It's the not knowing and having to change my plans and my design 4, 5, 6 times that causes delays, cost overruns, all these things, where if it was like you said, like, here for this neighborhood, this is the style that we want to try and adhere to and keep in line with that. And these are the bylaws you have to adhere to.
Sure.
And you can't go over that. Well, then I think that would speed up the process
And
quite
just
a
as
bit.
I'm an ideas person, you're making me think also, one thing that's also from the farm industry is having when you're ready to make that application, but you haven't yet made it, is to have a meeting and you talk. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're thinking of. Here's some pictures. Tell us, City of Beaconsfield, any concerns? Let's talk about that now. So when you put your file in, you're as close as you can be at that point to giving the city something that is close to what they're expecting, saving time.
Yep. And I think it's important for the city to give those guidelines in a very clear, sort of, here's all the things you need to do on your side to prepare for that meeting in order to speed up the process and not waste both sides' times in going back and forth.
For sure. Agreed.
Okay. What are some lessons that Beaconsfield could learn from other municipalities that have gone through this process that you've seen?
You can always learn. So I'll tell you, so I would be, within my first, if elected, my first few months, I would be, and I've already informally reached out people, so people know me in the municipal, provincial, federal, would be to have discussions and ask questions, densification, taxes, challenges you're facing, infrastructure, flooding, etc., and learn. And my questions would always be, teach me like what was your process? And then I always ask three questions. What worked really well that you're really proud of? And he would tell me this is like this, and that. Then the second question, because the hindsight's always 2020. What would you have done differently? And you get some. And then thirdly, what would you never do again? And if you build those rapports and those coalitions, you get honest answers. And people will tell you, then you bring that back to Beaconsfield and you say, here's what worked. Here's what should have been changed there in general. And here's what we should never do. Now let's apply that to Beaconsfield so that it works for us. For me, it's a simple exercise. It's investing your time and listening and talking to people.
What are some examples of stories you've heard about things that they wouldn't do again, or some things that they wish they'd done differently?
So I'm going to come back to my example with the West Island Assistance Fund, a phenomenal organization. Like this organization, to me, I'm just so proud that I'm part of that dream. So when I came on board, I'm coming from the private sector, pharmaceutical international, I had things to learn. So I reached out to the other two food banks and I chatted. It was the same question.
I know you've met with Tim Reed on Rock, who's been on our podcast.
Suzanne from West Island Mission.
Yep.
And even two others that are downtown large. And my questions were the same. Talk to me. What are you doing here? How did it work? How did you get here? What was your history? Same questions. What did you do that were really like you're so proud of? What would you have changed now that you've gone this far? And what are the things that you'd never do again? And with all of that, we brought that back to West Island Assistance Fund, and I had that knowledge I could impart on the board. In this case, it would be the council to say, here's learnings. Now let's make some good decisions. And voila, 6 months later, we're going to announce this project, which will be the best of all of these communities teaching us and learning and listening. And I think also a secondary benefit of that is we've created this rapport with all these other organizations, so we're closer to them.
Absolutely. I mean, collaboration, you can achieve so much more, right? In a much shorter period of time than trying to figure it out all on your own. And learning from other people's, mistakes and seeing the challenges they went through, you can try and avoid them this time going around. What would be some of if you would change one thing in Beaconsfield, if you became mayor, what would that be?
Oh, the first thing's communication.
Okay.
So for me, it's key. Like, if people don't know me, if they vote for me, it's because they like something. I'm hoping, because I do have good opponents. It would be the communication. The first thing, communication. So people know what is going on, and they're saying to themselves, "Yes, this was a good choice for whoever it is. This is a good choice. We understand. We're consulted. Now the rest we're comfortable. Like because they're going to talk. They're going to share. They're going to bring us along for the voyage."
And we've got multiple platforms, digital platforms today in today's day and age. And I know that there's Facebook groups like Beaconsfield Confidential, which you've got a very committed group of citizens who are sharing and debating issues on there. Do you think it would be important for the council and the mayor to have close communications with those groups and to be involved in those discussions?
So interesting, a timely question. So you may know before the nominations ended, I think it was October 5th, just shortly or before that, there was a communication from Russell Duncan and also Chantal Laforêt to say, here's questions with like all the candidates, whether you're mayor, whether you're for council person, to answer to us. So I answered them even before the deadline. I think it was October 6th. I'd heard about Beaconsfield Confidential. I reached out to them. I said, I want to learn. Like, I want to learn who you are. You've got 2,300 followers, or I shouldn't say in your group members.
Yeah.
I want to understand, like, how does this work? So short answer to your question, as part of that communication strategy, I'd like to understand, like, how is it that you went from a small organization to 2,300 members? I understand that Hudson also has a similar group also. Same function. I'd like to understand all that, and then decide, like, is it maybe time that Beaconsfield has it for all residents if they want to participate? So I'm looking at that, and I'm having some discussions. I'm hoping to meet Duncan and Chantal here in the next So I'm hoping probably before the elections, probably around the 20th, I'm going to be meeting with them and having some chance to better understand. And Hudson will come if I'm elected. I'll also be speaking with them.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I think that's very important is, the council being available to answer questions that citizens have throughout the year, not just right around election time.
Correct.
Right. So that's one thing is like, how do you keep engaged with residents on an ongoing basis?
So it's part of also communication. Like everything's sort of intertwined, which is not surprising. So you have to give information that's relevant, but that information has to create excitement. Obviously, you're not going to have people listening if you're not talking to them what's important to them and that's touching their passion. But when you see that passion, you have to be ready. And I just recently done this with a couple other projects. You have to be ready to put that passion and invite, not wait, but invite those people to come on board in some shape or fashion. Because I can guarantee you, if the people are excited about what they're doing, they will work hard. So, and they'll be engaged. Like that's engagement. I'm doing something that is really meaningful for me. I see a purpose and I'm motivated and I'm passionate about it. So hence, if you were to do that, and I plan to do that in some shape or form, when you get to elections, you're not asking people to come out and vote. They're voting. Like, because it's like my city, I'm proud, I want to be more involved. So that's all part of what I do, I believe very well, and I've done in the past, and I will do if I'm elected mayor.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your ideas and your vision for the future. I would invite anybody who has any questions, comments to reach out to you. How can they do that?
So I've got one. I'd like to, if you would mind, just bear with me a little comment at the end. So if they go to my website, which is www.gregoreorleski, they'll see that on the signage.
Yep. We'll have that in the show notes.
There's a email there that they can email me, and I will be responsive despite the fact that my days are pretty full.
Yeah.
With a lot of things, not just Beaconsfield, but also with the West Island Assistance Fund, I will answer. And my phone number is up on my their website, the Facebook, Instagram. My phone number is there. The phone number may be a little bit more difficult depending how many calls I get, but I will be responsive. And I'd like just to say one last thing, because we are although Beaconsfield, on est dans la province du Québec, donc je suis bilingue. Et j'aimerais juste dire que j'aurais pu faire l'entrevue en français. Je suis bilingue et j'invite les questions en français. So for that, j'ai travaillé extrêmement fort pour apprendre mon français dans l'ouest du Canada, à l'Université de l'Alberta. 3 mois, 4 mois au Lac-Saint-Jean, sans des gens qui parlaient anglais autour de moi. J'ai pratiqué pendant presque 8 ans en français. Donc, I'm sorry we couldn't be jumping back and forth, but I invite everyone who's comfortable, please, whatever language, even poco en español, también,
Oh, well,
if necessary, although I'd rather stick to the French and English. So Scott, thank you very much for taking time. And I want to thank the audio people also, so for being very patient with me. So thank you very much, and for inviting me.
thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Dang.
Gracias.
De nada.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
That was our conversation with Beaconsfield mayoral candidate Greg Orleski. Whether or not you agree with every idea, what's clear is that our community is stronger when residents and leaders talk openly about the issues that matter most: growth, transparency, and how we shape the next chapter of our city together. Election Day is Sunday, November 2nd, so make sure your voice is heard. Thanks for listening to the Broady Windsor Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a neighbor and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.